GM. Today, we're going to be talking about NFT NYC, just general NFT projects that are coming back to life a little bit here as ETH is somewhat stabilizing and everything else heading into the weekend. Welcome, Tyler. So last time we left on Monday, there's still tons of uncertainty out there in the markets. There wasn't a ton of necessarily news happening either. It was very quiet in the NFT streets, but a decent amount of stuff, like when we were talking before this show, a decent amount of stuff has happened already this week. So there's plenty of things for us to talk about today. How's your week been going?
It's good. Monday was looking like the apocalypse in the NFT space, and crypto markets were crashing, ETH was crashing, and so were the NFT floors across all the big and top end sets. So it was a pretty rough start to the week, but we've since had a nice little rebound, even though the crypto markets are still very shaky. And we've had like massive news with Celsius, and now Three Arrows Capital being insolvent and not being able to meet their margin calls. So the crypto markets look pretty shaky. Of course, that's going to have a continued impact on the NFT markets, but at least it's been somewhat of a steady and green week the past few days for NFTs. So that's been a little bit of a positive.
Yeah, it's somewhat interesting because people had always sort of touted this thesis that when ETH goes down, NFT prices should go up, and it hasn't really happened too often. But we haven't seen a big dip like this. So now, where Ethereum is down 60% off of its highs, and these projects are down 50% in a week, like all of a sudden, you're noticing like people are looking at these things in USD value, and some of this stuff. I saw a stat yesterday where CloneX is only like $2,000 more than what it minted at, and so people are putting out these stats now. Like other deeds is cheaper in USD right now than what it minted at, and it's kind of interesting to look at stuff that way. There was a post. This might have been. It seems like it was an NFT statistics post, but I think it might have been someone else that broke out what the current cost of these items are versus what they cost like a month ago in ETH terms. And some of the stuff was crazy. Like Moonbirds was at like 4 ETH. And some of these things were at 2 ETH or below. Even BAYC, I think, was 24 ETH on it. And so it was kind of interesting to see like what the differences was, because they were like, if you saw the price of these projects at this number for Ethereum, wouldn't you be buying in on them and wanting to? And so I think some people started thinking in the USD terms and decided to start buying into the dip, which supported some of these projects.
No, it's spot on. I think I saw the same tweet, and it said you'd be mortgaging your house to buy in to these projects, and certainly we've seen that's not a good decision to make. With
definitely no mortgage to do.
But no, I'm with you, and starting to think in USD terms. I mean, some of these projects are getting so cheap in USD. So for those who've got stables or just cash on the sidelines and want to move in, it's starting to get pretty tempting. Especially for those who talk about deploying dollar cost averaging strategies. But with all that being said, the general sentiment still is that we haven't bottomed yet, especially in the crypto space. I think a lot of folks think ETH is going to go, 700, 800 range. And if that happens, we'll likely see another NFT dip. Hopefully it's gobbled up as fast as this week's did. But I think a lot of people are still on the sidelines and kind of waiting for that event.
Yeah, I think right now it's sitting around $1,200 or so for Ethereum, and I could see it leveling there for a little bit at least. Like, I think to your point, like in my mind, I think it's more likely to hit $800 versus go back up to $2,000, which I'm not sure if that's the same percentage wise up and down, but I saw some stats like that where, yeah, I think for it to go back up, seems more difficult than to continue to go down just because of macro factors like the FOMC coming out with the 0.75 rate spike yesterday. Then we see, like, as you mentioned, with the 3 hours capital and Celsius, like there's still plenty of uncertainty in general markets. A lot of stocks have been down. And so people are just still unsure how to deploy this fiat that they might have gotten into more recently. They're still unsure where to be moving that for that next step, going through this summertime period. So it'll be interesting to see. So let's look at a little of the board here. We usual suspects are back up top. One thing, first, let's say, is there anything that stands out to you here? Because it's mostly just these top projects. It's not the new stuff anymore. So is there anything that sticks out to you on the board?
Yeah, that's the primary theme. Is we're back to liquidity and volume being concentrated in the top end sets, and I think that's a bit of a breath of fresh air. I think everyone was getting pretty burnt out on the free mint meta and just total garbage derivatives, minting, every other hour, every day across the weeks. So it seems like we've moved past that. I don't really recall any major free mints or stealth drops happening this week, really. So it's kind of nice to have that in the rearview mirror. Good to see, Bored Apes back up top. I think they're a good litmus test for the entire NFT space. For those who are following, like on the show on Monday, the floor hit 70 that was the peak bottom that I saw on Monday, and it's back to 86.5, 87. So that's a solid rebound. I mean, that's over 20%, 25% roughly. It's up. The mutants, I think there'll be a little on the mutants. I'll say mutants back at 16.5, a solid rebound for them. The Moonbirds have had a really nice string of sales the last few days, getting back to 18. I think maybe the other takeaway from this board is goblins are still in the top 5. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about the founder doxing event that happened, but are they a top end set? Are they a blue chip? And typically we hold the blue chip definition for those who have at least got to a 10th floor at one point and maintained it. So by that measure, that they're not there yet. But every week we come on the show, goblins is top 5. So I think it's a big open question. Are they going to be able to continue staying relevant, staying in the top 5 on a weekly basis, going into a continued bear? And if that's the case, if the answer is yes, then at that entry price, you got to start taking them seriously.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where, and we could go into that a little bit here, but they seem to be one that is going to come out of this section. You talked about it on Monday, where a lot of times there are 1 or 2 projects that just kind of separate themselves from the rest of the junk, if we want to call it that. But yeah, they basically put out this video, which I don't know. How did you take it? Because part of it is like they wanted to, in my mind, like show they are legit, and they have like a legit team behind them. They also wanted to come out at NFT NYC and not just be some random people that are anon on the internet. So what was your thoughts on this sort of reveal?
It's so funny, and it just shows kind of how two-faced the NFT market really is. So coming out of the Zagabond and Azuki disaster, when we learned about Zagabond's past as an anon and essentially rugging a few different projects, we all kind of stood forward and said, no more anonymous founders. Like, we're not going to invest big money into anonymous teams. And here comes the Goblin team, fresh off the hottest month in NFTs. They're the number 1 project. They're commanding a 5 or 6 ETH floor price after their first airdrop, which is pretty solid numbers. They come out, they dox themselves, and the floor falls from 5.5, all the way down to 3 ETH, almost a 50% drop. And the reality is this market trades on hype and anticipation, and when you kind of check a box when you deliver something, a lot of times it takes some of the mystery away, and you see these sell-offs, and it's definitely unfortunate. Um, but if you believe in this project, if you believe in these founders, it should just be a nice re-entry option. And what this does is set them up to be taken more seriously, as they look to move forward with the brand, they doing collaborations, who they work with, continuing to make connections into the future. So it's a net positive to me, but certainly not a positive to the market valuation.
Yeah, it's almost like there are plenty of people that had bought into goblins who liked that idea, that there was a lot of unknown surrounding the leaders and the way that they were pretending to dox themselves but not doxing themselves. I think a lot of people did like that side of it. So I think it's tough because at some point they're kind of right, where at some point they probably would have to get doxxed or might as well do it yourself. This kind of brings us into the next topic with Zac XBT, who has been pretty much undoxing people recently and coming out. And this time of the cycle is sort of a calling out portion. It's been pretty common more recently, where are people going to stick around? Oh, these projects have scams in the past, the leaders of the project. So this one came out was this morning, where Zac had, I think, a week or two ago, said basically look out for this day. So instead of doing a thread, Zac XBT put out a Medium article, and I believe also posted it to mirror.xyz, which is also where you can mint it as an NFT. And so this article basically, if we want to say, exposed Mackie Big Brother, and talks about, as Zac puts it, because I don't want to make any allegations here, but as Zac puts it, 22,000 Ethereum embezzled and over 10 projects failed, and talks about the actual doc's name of Mackie Big Brother, which in here he's saying is Jeff. And so what was your take here? Because this is a pretty big name, one of the biggest ape holders. I believe at one point in time was the biggest ape holder, whether it was in like Ape Coin itself, he was up there, but also in number of apes held. So what's your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think a few of my takeaways is, one, you don't know who's behind the PFP, right? And don't put these people up on pedestals when you don't know their backstories, just because they're trading in big dollars. And I think a lot of people were idolized. I thought it was Machi. I thought you said it was Machi Big Brother. I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm not sure. But I mean, I think people in the BAYC community idolize this guy. Like, he's kind of leading proposals, leading discussions in the ApeCoin DAO. A lot of people are following his advice. And again, like, I haven't dug into all of the allegations enough to have, a personal opinion on whether or not these allegations are true. But I mean, I read the article. It's a deep, lengthy article. It's about a 20-minute read, and he's got the screenshots and the transactions and the wallets that backs up all of his claims. Zac does. So it's I feel like now the burden will be on Machi to prove that this is false. And he came out and tweeted that if Zac XBT wasn't anon, he'd be suing him for slander. But that wasn't much of a denial, right? Like, this feels like a situation where he should be kind of going point by point and explaining all of these moves if he's actually in the right here. So this looks pretty bad for Machi, and I think it's just another anon, pseudo anon to kind of fall from grace. And guess what? It's not going to be the last.
Yeah, and Gravity's talking in chat about the Three Arrows Capital, and I think they're a little different of a story, but I think there's a lot of similarities here in the idea of these are some of the bigger names where they buy into a project you get all excited about, and now I mean, can you trust these big names, as you're mentioning? Some people are trying to expose people that were at Three Arrows Capital as well. So it's definitely one of those things where it's like you lose some trust at the top end, and those were the companies and people who, when they bought into projects, that sort of cemented some of these projects as legit and the big winners. So it's tough because I think Three Arrows is a little more on the punk side. I think they're less of ape holdings, but I mean, if you're going to be a big player in NFTs, like you have to have some sort of exposure to the apes. So, do you think this loses some credibility to any of the top end projects?
I don't know about that, but I've got a few thoughts on Three Arrows Capital. So I saw like a nice analogy on Twitter today about how like everything that we're seeing in the crypto space right now is very similar to the 2008 financial institution and banking crisis, but the government bailed out a lot of those banks and funds, and there's no one to bail out these crypto companies, so they're just going to fail. And it's not necessarily that Three Arrows Capital was scamming anyone; they just made big bets on leverage, and those bets didn't pan out, and they couldn't meet their margin calls. But I think the interesting impact for the NFT market is so Three Arrows Capital bought several Grail NFTs. They also either led the raise with Starry Night Capital with Vince Van Dough, or at least were a pretty major contributor. So I've got a lot of questions right now on what is going to happen to those Grails. Because they've got some of the very, very top generative art and one-of-one art NFTs that are out there. And of course, those are much harder to liquidate than coins are. And if they were trying to sell them right now, I think they can maybe get 20 to 30%, of what they're worth. So it's definitely not a good time to do it, but I'm very curious if they're going to do so. And then, kind of taking it back to the entire crypto market space, this is not the last domino to fall, right? Like 2 weeks ago, we would have been pretty shocked sitting here talking about Three Arrows Capital, failing and being insolvent. So I think we're all just kidding ourselves if we think this is, not going to happen again, and potentially to some bigger players. And it just exposes a lot of the risk with the centralized players in the space. And it kind of shines a bright light on DeFi, because a lot of, the transactions there are more transparent. You can see what's going on, except for, with the centralized where it's a little bit more private, you don't necessarily know what's happening behind the scenes with the money. So that's my off the cuff reactions to the 3AC. I'm very curious how this is going to pan out with related to their NFTs that they hold.
Yeah, my thought is like, this is just I'm just thinking of this now, but maybe this is a good use case for fractionalizing the higher end stuff. They might be able to get more liquidity out doing it that way as well. But these higher ends, like fractionalizing, might work better, and sort of giving it back to the community. But yeah, like especially with Vince Van Dough in there, he buys a lot of the high end generative art and isn't big on selling. So also is, as you mentioned, going to show a lot of the illiquidity of some of the higher end market. And then I just wanted to mention, with before we move off of this Zac XBT, the other one that he somewhat exposed was this players only NFT. And I was working on a little piece where Knights of Djinn, they came out yesterday and said that they're going to basically be taking over the players only project, and they're somewhat giving back to the players only holders by allowing them to then mint Knights of Djinn as if the original mint. So Knights of Djinn's like a 0.3 ETH floor, and they're allowing them to get in at 0.088. Some of that is coming from a treasury from the players only funds. Some of that is coming from the Knights of Djinn community themselves. So this is one to sort of look out for, where making it right in a way, off of one of these threads that was exposing people and in that case, it was NBA players. So Michael Carter Williams is the big name involved in this one, who's connected with Knights of Djinn, who that's how they sort of joined forces in order to come up with this. And it's combining communities and making some right out of people that felt like they got rugged on what could also be considered just a failed project. But this is another one to look out for. Will be coming soon. The Knights of Djinn, they are doing a fun little night on Monday at NFT NYC that, depending on when I get there, I might end up going to. But before we get into NFT NYC, let's talk about a little of from what we said on Monday on upcoming projects. Let's look back at some of those to see how they did, how just in general these new mints on the week have turned out. So this Lacoste one, they minted out and they're currently above the floor is currently above what they minted at. So what was your thoughts here on Lacoste?
Yeah, so this is the big winner of the week for sure. I think my page is a little outdated here. Oh wow, so these are at 0.34. So these things have been flying.
Yeah.
OS is lagging. Oh, there it is. It's finally refreshed. So it was 0.08 mint, 11,200 of these. So it was a little bit questionable if they're going to be able to mint these out. But the pre-sale, it was all right out of the gate trading above the mint price, which is always a good sign. And they sold out, and they've got some solid momentum here. So I definitely didn't necessarily expect a 4x from mint here in just and this minted out yesterday. So we're day one right now. So this is fresh. I still don't know all that much about the project. But this is definitely the big winner of the week and proves that, a big name project with a big brand, with a good team, can absolutely still have a successful mint in this macro.
Yeah, and I didn't see, but is there going to be a reveal, or is this going to be some sort of pass? Because I think if there's a future reveal, that will potentially hold up the floor a little bit for people that might want something that's rarer. So I think that could keep this above. But so far, as you mentioned, like whenever these hold up above a 0.3 ETH floor, I think it's likely to sit around above the original mint price as of at least right now. It seems like they're holding up pretty well even in this market.
Yeah, it looks like they're teasing an announcement here of everything that's to come. But
soon, yeah.
I still don't know if
Just
there
tagging
will be
Elon.
if there's going to be a reveal on this. I would assume that there is. That was always my assumption.
Yeah.
So,
But there aren't like previews as to what it would be. So
there really aren't. We really don't know much. So
maybe that's why people like it, the unknown, uncertainty.
I need to turn notifications on, so I'm curious. I want to find out what the plan is for this one.
Yeah.
But so this was the silver lining in what was a pretty brutal week for the other new mints. So just quickly on Artblocks, we had the Photons Dream come out on Wednesday, barely 10% got minted there. So it's been a higher supply, so it's 400. We've seen more success in supplies around 200 and a little bit lower of a mint price. So Artblocks may not be back. It might be back to the AB is dead range. So I think we have a nice test tomorrow with Rotor, with the artist from Crypto Art, and a lower supply. I'll be curious if that one catches more traction. And if it's a 0.14, so a little bit pricier for factory. If that one mints out, then I think we're fine. If this one struggles, then we might be back to crickets for Artblocks.
Yeah, and as we mentioned the other day, it's under 300 count, and it's the Crypto Art connection. So I would expect this one to sell out, whether or not that means it's going to be profitable for you or not. It's out of 285. They have the Crypto Art connection. It's curated. It's going to be on a Friday. The market is somewhat lukewarm. with things right now. I think the doom and gloom of earlier in the week and end of last week, I think some people are a little more comfortable to spend on this, and if they saw, like how Lacoste is doing. So this one I'm going to be watching for. Yeah, what else on the week that we originally were talking about?
Yeah,
This Anero.
brutal turnout for the Narrowverse project. So only 2,000 minted. The floor is back to below the public sale mint price. So they've already made a pivot. So just a few hours ago, they're talking about they're going to do a snapshot and then do an airdrop for additional NFTs to anyone who's still holding. So it'll be curious what the final supply of the project is. I think that's kind of an interesting decision. As a holder for one of these collections that fails, what would you rather have happen? Would you rather have the supply cut at 2,000, which maybe turns it into a little bit more attractive, or would you rather still have the full 10,000, but now you've got 5 versus 1?
I like the smaller count. I just think in general, like there's so many and too many projects out there now to have that many over 1 ETH 10K projects in general. So I think a lot of these projects do overdo it when they go up to too high of a supply count. So that's sort of my thought with this. I think in a project like this at this time, I don't know if it really would have worked out for them anyway.
Right.
But we have seen that work out with some projects. I think one issue is like if people didn't really want it before, why are they going to want it now? Just because it's a lower supply and it's a higher cost. So non-fungible films did that. I remember they had a relatively high mint cost. Instead of lowering the mint cost, they just cut off supply around like 1,000 mints. And so it has worked out for some projects. But yeah, I'm on the side of lower supply.
And the market's seen how the Azuki-like products have traded. So we had the whole round with Akuma, or not Akuma, Everai. I'm blanking on some of the other names, but there was like 3 Azuki-like products that came out. They all ran and they all fell flat. So there's not really
Azuna,
much.
Lives of
Yeah,
Azuna.
that was one. The other big name pivot or failed mint for this week, let's just call it what it is, Lonely
Yeah,
Pop. So a lot of folks were following this one. There was a lot of eyes on it. They held their Dutch auction. The final price was 0.25, and they didn't budge on that, and they did not mint very many NFTs. I actually didn't see the count, but I want to say it's like 700. So very low. And apparently they pulled the community. They made a decision to relaunch the sale here at a lower price point. So the whitelisters are going to get it for 0.075, and then if there's remaining, and I don't know the numbers on the whitelist here, but the public sale will be 0.15 here. My reaction to the pivot on this one is it still kind of screams cash grabby to me. Like I was mainly focused on the public sale. Dropping from 0.25 to 0.15 is not going to move the needle on a failed mint out. Like I can say that right now.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 0.25 to 0.075 is enough, but we were chatting before the show. My general take on these new launches, if you don't nail that initial sale, it's so hard to get momentum to drive any amount of FOMO, once you've kind of bricked a launch. So I would not bet on this one to mint out.
Yeah, and I don't get when projects still do it this way after they fail. They're like, okay, well, public is still going to be 2 times the price, and it's like, well, one side of that is it's only an hour after. That to me is probably leaning more to the side that it won't work out, because in that hour, like how many are going to mint, people are already somewhat concerned, I think, because of the failed initial. And so now you just drop it, as you mentioned, like you didn't drop it all that much, and is 0.15 not wanting to mint to 0.25 doesn't mean you're going to want to mint at 0.15. Like that's not that big enough of a gap. If they did like 0.075 to 0.1 maybe, but I mean, still making this 2 times the price. And then like what happens if not too many people mint in the private sale? Then no one's going to want to mint in the public sale. So I don't necessarily think this is going to be the best way for them to do it, but who knows? Like they were pretty hyped up before. They seemed to go back and talk to the community to see what they wanted. One of the options I think was to go free. So we'll see. This one is obviously going to be going this weekend. Oh, that's not 1 hour. That's a day and an hour. So
good call. I was thinking it was 1 hour too, so I missed that. So
okay, so it starts on Saturday and Sunday.
It's good and it's bad. So at least now that's enough time. Like you have everyone in different time zones, right? Everyone will have a fair shot to mint. So I do like that. The downside is now there's no FOMO window in the private sale, right? So
yeah,
if that doesn't sell out before the public sale, there's no shot that anyone's going to mint in the public.
It's almost like they shouldn't put the price of public out yet. Be like public price determined off of what's the project that did that? There was one that they did their price based off of what the like OpenSea floor was. I just feel like that might be a better way to do it because it's like, well, you can have the chance to mint it at what the current price is right now. It's almost better than trying to force people to say, oh, well, it's going to be 0.15 because then the market is just going to if it goes up to 0.2, it'll come back towards the 0.15. Like the market is efficient enough at this point that when you give that 0.15 25 hours later, the likelihood is the market is going to balance to that or be under it. Like I would think in this scenario where people already didn't want to pay 0.25 for it.
I mean, minting mechanics and prices aside, I mean, the problem with this one is it just looks like a Boki ripoff in a lot of ways. So
yeah,
because of that, I think this one already had low probability of success from their launch, but certainly one to watch here this weekend on really a pretty light weekend for new drops.
mm-hmm.
And it'll be interesting. Will founders try to drop in the next week or two in this current macro when we've seen, 4 failures for every success, and the true numbers are probably even worse off than that. Just with the major ones we're following.
Yeah.
And I don't even preview the ones that have 9,000 followers on Twitter and already look very unlikely to sell out. So it's probably 10-1 success to fail or the success ratio right now. So a pretty brutal time to be launching.
Yeah. All right. Well, the other big piece of news that we haven't talked about yet before we get over to NFT NYC is the Seaport stuff. So one thing that popped up this week was OpenSea. They're using now this new protocol called Seaport. So what's your takes here? Because some people like it because they didn't like the Wyvern one previously. They're adding some stuff that's somewhat more along the lines of being able to trade NFTs and specify offers. So what was your take on this Seaport so far?
I love it. I think they have addressed a lot of user feedback in this update. I actually saw some chatter on Twitter that what OpenSea had been doing over the past year was really working on scaling their platform, and now they're starting to address the user feedback issues. And man, if that's the case, if that's true reality, that's bad news for LooksRare and X2Y2 and any other competing marketplace, where I guess really the only competitive lever they're going to have will be fees if OpenSea is going to continue to address these feedback items, because this is a solid update. So Jason Bales wrote a really nice article, and I love the TLDR section. I just jumped right to it. But we've got lower fees, ability to do bulk transfers. The trading feature is really cool. So you can trade NFTs with ETH. So I could trade like a Moonbird plus 5 ETH to someone for a different Moonbird right through their platform. So, and then the other piece of that is you can do multi NFT for NFT transactions. So I could do a Doodle and a Moonbird for an Azuki and a CloneX if I wanted to. So like right there, they're taking away the need for these trading sites, which has been a huge vector for risk and for hacks. So that's a huge positive to the community. Then like the trade offers, that's nice. Yeah, I think this the tipping feature is a really interesting one. I haven't really thought about tipping a seller upon the completion of a trade, but I'll be curious how frequently this one gets used and kind of what the situations are.
Yeah, I wonder how often there's going to be like demand for one specific item. Maybe that's more on like one of one stuff. I feel like someone who could try to test that out would be Franklin, where he's like, "Oh yeah, you guys want my ape, but it's gonna instead of like go to the highest bidder, it's almost kind of like that. But oh, you're willing to, I have 4 apes that I want to sell. Like you're willing to buy them all in one, then because I have to pay less or whatever. Not really sure either how that's gonna fully play out, but I could see that for like one of one generative art stuff a little more so. But it's like, why not just have the price higher versus the tipping side? So maybe the tipping of NFTs, but that's kind of like what the trading side of it as well.
That piece makes a little more sense to me. Like, okay, if you sell me your Bored Ape for this price, I'll also throw in some crypto kicks, right? Something to juice up the deal a little bit. So that makes more sense. But like adding ETH doesn't really. Why wouldn't you just change the price? So I don't see that one as much. But huge update. Some folks probably had to sign some new transactions this week. You'll see the different language. I think another item to watch will we have clear language for what we're signing on these transactions with the Seaport protocol? Hopefully the answer is yes. I haven't transacted enough this week to have a good feel yet.
Yeah, and one thing I've noticed, and it had affected our site as well, was the prices are, because you have to sort of remap everything. A lot of these sites that were bringing it in before have had some issues. I know NFT Nerds was having a lot of issues the other day on it as well. So that's one thing to know, is a lot of that reason is because there's a new protocol, and that's what it is, the Seaport. So check out the interview or not interview, but the piece that Jason did on our website here. It breaks it down really well, and like you said, the TLDR portion for those that want to get it completely dumbed down because there's a lot involved. Like I did the original post on this when it got announced, but there's so much detail in there on what they're doing, and a lot of it is pretty thought out on their end. So it's nice to see OpenSea doing stuff like this to improve their product. So
absolutely
cool. So let's talk a little about NFT NYC, which is next week, and it's been a big talking point in general for people. But I wanted to get at first your take on, what's your expectation out of this? Do you think people are going to come out of this more bullish on NFTs, or will there be certain clear winners of projects? Like what's your sort of higher end view on what NFT NYC is going to bring out?
So I'm going to put my optimistic hat on for a few minutes and talk about some potential upside scenarios from this. So I think one thing that's always played out in the NFT space is that IRL events for project collections energizes the holders who attend, and they kind of come out of these events a little bit more excited about the project and its future, having met fellow collectors. I think there's been a few instances where maybe the IRL events have gone sour. I think one specific is DZ Fi did not like the vibe of the Bored Ape community at Ape Fest last year and decided to leave that group because of his experiences there. But putting that aside, I think some great examples are South by Southwest and the Doodles event. I mean, everyone was super fired up for Doodles coming out of that first Azuki party in LA. And, of course, there was the airdrop, which stole the headlines. But, the Azuki community was rock solid coming out of that party. So I think there's a lot of expectations for that. Hopefully, folks aren't just expecting the check your wallets at these parties, because this is not a good market to be launching the companions, the bonuses into. I mean, there's no buy pressure compared to what we've had just a month ago. So I think savvy founders will realize that and won't be trying to kind of force bonuses and airdrops to everyone. But then, is that going to negatively affect the market if folks were expecting some big news announcements or drops at these parties? So it might, but I think there's definitely ways that it can be a positive. I think on the negative side, it's a little tough to party in this atmosphere right now, and like people aren't going to NFT NYC for the conference because there's more speakers than there are attendees at this one. So there's no real headliners with good talks to go to. So everyone's just going for the parties. It's kind of weird to party when your bags are down 95% in the last 30 days. So I'm curious, will it be a positive atmosphere, or will the macro conditions kind of be hanging over everyone's heads?
Yeah, and I think you laid it out pretty well. Like I hope these projects, their big reveal at these parties weren't going to just be that check your wallets, because I mean, I don't know, is that just going to hurt even more? Like there's not enough liquidity to go after all of these. Pretty much every bigger name project is going to be there, but also all the mid-range projects are going to be there. Like if you're an NFT project that launched in the past 6 months, or let's even say since the last NFT NYC, like if you're not there, I feel like there's an issue. It's almost like you're waving the white flag in that way. But yeah, we have a lot of these events listed up on Lucky Trader. We have a post going where we're putting some of the bigger name stuff that a lot of people in our audience are interested in. Most of it is from that Monday to Wednesday range. Obviously, Ape Fest is the big name, but I don't know. I think people always have happy are kind of happy at parties in general, especially if you're going, if there's open bar, if there's cool entertainment. You're meeting a lot of these people that you've only known from online for the past year and a half or whatever. So I think people probably are going to still be in decent moods for that reason, but it'll be interesting. You wonder if you're going to go to some of these events and people start calling out the project leaders, or just stirring the pot in that way. I could see that some of the projects might have that, but a lot of these have pretty good communities of people who are that's why they're going, is because they are part of these communities that they enjoy. Which of these events kind of stuck out to you just in general, whether or not it would be one that, oh, I'm interested in going, or like, oh, that's a cool thing they're doing?
Yeah, so I think starting with Sunday, one that's actually not on this list is the Wrecked Guy event from OSF and Mando. They just squeezed an event out here just this week. It's going to be Sunday. As a newer project, kind of launched in this area, has had some mixed success, but a fairly big presence on Twitter. I think that will be an interesting one to watch and see if it kind of galvanizes a group who can rally about being wrecked in this current market. So that's a big one for Sunday. Of course, Ape Fest Monday, kicking off, is going to be a big one. I think we've already seen the previews of the Ape Coin logo on some of the streets of Manhattan. Although I think I was reading this morning, there still isn't very much detail on on the events. So a little bit of disappointment in Yuga on kind of how late they are in announcing some of these. So curious if we'll get more info there. And then Tuesday seems to be the day when everything's happening, right? So the Moonbirds party, which was very difficult to get tickets to. They had to open up a second claim to get more folks in. The Doodles party is happening that day. Then I want to say there's another. So Azuki's the next day. So those are two of the bigger ones happening there.
There's also the Pixelval in Gutter Cats are that day as well. I thought there was another one. I'm trying to think of what it was. Goblins, the Goblintown one. Yeah.
So this is my sneaky favorite party of the week. I think this could be absolute mayhem. I have no clue what the collector base for this product looks like, who these people are.
Yeah.
And given its recent run up, not many people have had plans or had the chance to really book travel to get to New York, except in just the last few weeks. So I'm curious. This one is absolutely my wild card, which could be one of the crazier, more fun parties.
I'd go to get one of the McGoblin burgers.
Oh yeah, I forgot they were doing that.
Full aspect, yeah.
And then Wednesday we've got the Azuki event. They're doing 2 nights, so that'll be an interesting one. I mean, that's one where half the community's turned over since the Zagabond fallout. It's their second big party, East Coast now. All the parties today have been pretty hyped, but the atmosphere is definitely a little different. So be very curious, kind of coming out of that one, what the vibes are like. I was surprised to see Mims was doing an event. The Pingus are out partying as well. Trying to think on Thursday if there's much on my radar. I mean, Gutter Cat Gang is on here every day, so they're doing a lot. They're all over. The Cool Cats is all over. So
is Artifact what they're probably doing? I know they kept like changing.
They did some events about a month ago, so I think they're not, which pros and cons. I think one nice thing about the way they did their event was it was kind of solo. They had more focus on just their stuff versus now. I mean, you're dealing with this dilemma right now. Like, how are you going to split your time on some of these days? And like Wednesday, I think still up in the air for you on which one of these you might jump into.
Yeah, I'm not really sure yet. Some of these you have to obviously be holders from. This one on Wednesday, I was looking at those Cryptoon Goon events. That one with the Creepy Club in Tropics, they're going out on a boat. But the 2 events that they had on the day, they had limited spots, so it was raffled off. So unfortunately I didn't get them. But yeah, sort of looking at like what's going on. I know I've talked to a few people who are just kind of like, well, some of these things you just figure out last minute anyway. Like that, like maybe I go to that Zed Run event instead. Like that one sounds kind of cool. They're gonna have Ben Simmons at it as well. So there's always going to be something to do. Like there's plenty that aren't on this list as well, or either smaller communities or people just meeting up on their own with others. There was an event that it's like, I think it's like Cryptoys and Juicebox Friends, and there's that like crew of the female streamers who they're kind of combining their projects together and doing a project or an event. I think that's on Wednesday that I might head over to, and it's just kind of like every day there's something that Cool Cats is doing. Like pretty much you can find something to do each of the sections. Maybe I go to the Alien Boy event, so or something that's conference related. I know there's a lot of like art events that we don't really have listed on here, but there's a decent amount of one-of-one artists that are doing different events throughout the week. So excited, obviously, like want to do the Moonbirds one. I'm still holding out hope for potentially on Wednesday. I don't get why they have witch hats and wizard hats and they don't have top hats
Oh man,
at the magic show. Like,
what a brutal beat that is.
so I mean, I guess I get it. The witches get in there, but I mean, think about how many of the magicians out there in the world have used top hats for their tricks. So
I mean,
uh,
top hat's more iconic for magicians than a witch hat is.
gonna
So
try to work some magic on Tuesday night potentially and see if there's a way, but because they just opened up some more space for that event. I don't know if
oh,
you saw that
nice.
earlier.
Oh, I missed that. Yeah.
They moved the location, so it's a little bigger room.
Okay.
It's mostly for like plus ones, but maybe with more space they'll allow it. So we'll see. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting. There are likely going to be winners and losers from this event. I think Monday night is when the Doodles are announcing Duplicator, what it is. So to me, they're like a very clear going to be announcing something that people have eyes on. So they might end up being the winners just because we know they already have something happening. So, and it sounds like it could be innovative, whatever it ends up being. That one will be one that I'm sure we'll talk about next week as well, or the week after that. Probably won't be streaming on Monday. I'll be traveling to go to this, but hope to come back for Thursday to maybe give some recaps on it, on the event in general. But yeah, basically next week could be pretty quiet. And obviously, people will be on Twitter tweeting about things that are happening. You'll probably hear about whenever there's news. There's going to be probably tons of news from each of these projects. That comes out of this because, as we've mentioned the last few shows, I think a lot of teams have waited on announcements for these events. So
Absolutely. I'll be looking forward to your boots on the ground reporting. I think
yeah,
one big takeaway from NFT NYC last year was G Money kind of famously saw how strong the Bored Ape Yacht Club community was. And this is back, their floor price is still pretty low. In June of 2021, and was looking at how Larva Labs and CryptoPunks didn't have anything, and he kind of made the prediction right there that punks could go down and Bored Apes could go up. And I mean, you got to give him credit; he was spot on, and you know that was an insight that came out of what we saw at NFT NYC last year. So, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some additional insights like that come out of the event this year. With this many project teams, with this many events, you mentioned there's going to be winners and losers, but there very well might be some very big winners. And I'll be very curious to follow along with all that.
Yeah. So, and look forward to that. I mean, technically, people are probably going to start heading in there this weekend. So people will start. I won't be getting into New York until like Monday, but there is stuff that's going to be happening over the weekend. I know there's the NFT BA that they're doing like a basketball tournament on, I want to say Saturday. And so there's just like stuff to do if you go there this weekend. There's always going to be some sort of thing all the way through the week. So excited about it. Like, I think it'll be cool to sort of meet some people who I haven't met in person before at these events. And, maybe David Blaine teaches me how to do some magic tricks. I could show them for you guys when I come back or something, that's likely to happen. Obviously, once I show him the top hat on the Moonbird, he'll be so excited. So excited for that, and we'll see you guys next week. And have a good weekend, and have a good just NFT NYC journey if you're going. So see ya.